For most of its long history, Rome stood at a crossroads between monarchy, oligarchy, and popular rule. It never became a modern democracy, but it flirted with elements of one more than any ancient superpower before it. To ask what might have happened if Rome created a democracy resembling modern nations is not pure fantasy. It is a grounded historical thought experiment, rooted in real Roman institutions, real social conflicts, and real structural limits that prevented democracy from fully emerging. The Roman Republic, founded after the overthrow of kings in 509 BCE, already contained some democratic features. Citizens voted in assemblies, elected magistrates, and passed laws. Yet the system was deeply unequal. Voting was weighted by wealth. Political offices were unpaid and dominated by elites, and most power rested with the Senate, an aristocratic body. Modern democracy, by contrast, is based on legal equality, broad suffrage, representative institutions, and the idea that sovereignty belongs to the people. Rome never crossed that threshold, but historians can clearly identify why, and what might have changed if it had. One major obstacle was Rome's class structure. Roman society was divided between patricians, plebeians, equestrians, freedmen, and slaves. Although plebeians gained rights over time, including the ability to elect tribunes and hold office, political power remained concentrated among a small elite. A modern-style democracy would have required dismantling this hierarchy, especially the political dominance of noble families. Historically, Rome moved in the opposite direction. As it expanded, wealth inequality increased, land concentrated in fewer hands, and political offices became tools of elite competition rather than public service. If Rome had created a modern democratic system, one of the first changes would have been universal citizenship with equal voting power. In reality, Roman voting assemblies favored the wealthy by design. The Centuriate Assembly, for example, allowed the richest classes to vote first, often deciding elections before poorer citizens even cast a ballot. A democratic reform would have required one-person, one-vote principles, something no ancient society fully implemented. This shift alone would have dramatically altered Roman politics, reducing aristocratic control and amplifying popular interests. Representation would have been another revolutionary change. Rome practiced direct voting in assemblies, which worked only when the citizen population was small and concentrated in the city. As Rome expanded across Italy and later the Mediterranean, direct democracy became impractical. Modern democracies solved this through representative institutions. If Rome had adopted elected representatives from provinces and regions, it could have integrated its vast population politically rather than ruling it administratively. This is a historically plausible alternative, especially given Rome's eventual extension of citizenship to Italians after the Social War. The Social War from 91 to 88 BC is a key factual moment supporting this idea. Rome's Italian allies rebelled not to overthrow Rome, but to gain citizenship and political rights. Rome eventually granted these rights, proving that it could expand political inclusion under pressure. A democratic Rome might have taken this further, creating representative provincial assemblies and a central legislature reflecting the empire's diversity. This could have reduced revolts, strengthened loyalty, and slowed the cycle rebellion that plagued imperial rule. Another crucial factor is the military. In Rome, military service and political power were tightly linked. Generals gained loyalty from soldiers through land grants and personal allegiance, undermining republican institutions. Modern democracies maintain civilian control of the military, separating political authority from armed force. If Rome had established firm constitutional limits on generals, standardized military pay from the state, and prevented personal armies, it might have avoided the rise of figures like Julius Caesar. Historically, the failure to control military ambition was a direct cause of the republic's collapse. Economic structure would also have needed reform. Rome's economy relied heavily on slave labor, especially after major conquests. Slavery distorted labor markets, concentrated wealth, and removed incentives for technological innovation. Modern democracies depend on free labor and a broad middle class. There is strong historical evidence that Rome's reliance on slavery weakened its social cohesion and long-term economic resilience. A democratic Rome would likely have needed to phase out mass slavery, promote small land ownership, and protect citizen livelihoods, policies briefly attempted by the Gracchi brothers. The Gracchi reforms offer another factual anchor for the scenario. Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, in the 2nd century BCE, sought land redistribution, grain subsidies, and legal protections for the poor. Their reforms were popular, but violently resisted by the Senate. Their deaths marked a turning point toward political violence. Had Rome institutionalized such reforms within a democratic framework, rather than suppressing them, it might have stabilized its society instead of radicalizing it. Historians widely agree that inequality and elite resistance accelerated the republic's breakdown. A democratic Rome would also have required a written constitution with enforceable limits on power. Rome relied heavily on tradition, precedent, and unwritten norms. This worked for centuries but collapsed under stress. Modern democracies depend on codified laws, independent courts, and checks and balances. Rome had some elements of this, such as term limits in collegial offices, but enforcement depended on elite goodwill. When ambition overrode norms, there was no strong institutional defense. A constitutional framework might have restrained authoritarian drift. Religion and ideology would have played a role as well. Roman religion emphasized tradition, hierarchy, and civic duty, not individual rights. Modern democracy rests on the idea of legal equality and personal liberty. While Rome valued citizenship, it did not conceive of rights as inherent to individuals. A democratic Rome would have required a major ideological shift, redefining citizenship not as privilege granted by the state, but as a source of legitimate authority. This kind of shift did eventually occur much later in Western history, but not in antiquity. If Rome had succeeded in becoming a democracy, the consequences for world history would have been immense. A democratic Roman Empire might have evolved into a federated system resembling a proto-European Union, integrating diverse cultures under shared political institutions. This could have slowed or prevented the fragmentation of the Western Empire. Historically, Rome struggled to govern distant territories without local representation. Democratic integration might have made the empire more adaptable and resilient. However, it is also important to acknowledge the real limits. Ancient technology, communication speed, and literacy rates made modern democracy extremely difficult. Most citizens could not read laws or follow distant political debates. Travel was slow, information spread unevenly, and administrative capacity was limited. These material conditions matter. Even if Rome had wanted to create a modern democracy, it may not have been able to sustain one across such vast territory without technologies that would not exist for another 1,500 years. There is also the question of cultural resistance. Roman elites defined themselves through honor, lineage, and dominance. Power sharing conflicted with deeply ingrained social values. Every major attempt to broaden participation was met with fierce opposition. This resistance was not accidental. It was structural. Any democratic transformation would likely have involved prolonged conflict, possibly civil war, before stabilizing. History shows that Rome repeatedly chose order through authority over reform through inclusion. Ultimately, the fall of the Roman Republic and the rise of the empire suggest that Rome faced a choice between expanding democracy and centralized rule. Faced with inequality, unrest, and military threats, Rome chose stability under emperors. This choice worked for a time. The empire brought peace, infrastructure, and legal uniformity, but at the cost of political freedom. A democratic Rome might have been messier, slower, and more contentious, but potentially more sustainable in the long run. What this thought experiment reveals is not that Rome failed to invent democracy, but that democracy requires specific social, economic, and technological conditions. Rome came close in some respects, but its expansion outpaced its political evolution. The Republic was designed for a city-state, not a global empire. Modern democracy succeeded where Rome struggled largely because they developed alongside new technologies, economic systems, and ideas about rights. In the end, a democratic Rome is a powerful reminder that political systems are a product of their time. Rome's legacy shaped later democratic thought, especially ideas about law, citizenship, and republicanism. While it never became a modern democracy, its struggles deeply influenced those that eventually did. The question is not why Rome failed to create democracy, but how close it came and what its experience teaches us about the fragile balance between power, equality, and governance.